Better late than never. We are here. LA traffic gets the best of really anybody. And I'm glad I don't have to deal with LA traffic the way that Ryan does. But Ryan is here nonetheless. And we're going to talk a lot about the Rams and the 49ers, but maybe not in the sense of what happens in this game so much, because this game does not mean much, if anything, for either of these teams. So much so that Stafford and Purdy are not going to play. We get the matchup we all want to see, which is Wentz and Sam Darnold. This is the way that we drew it up. Week 18, both teams going to the playoffs, Wentz versus Darnold, but we are going to talk a lot about both these teams, and we're going to do it next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Wednesday night, which means Behind Enemy Lines is here. This week, it's the Rams. A little anticlimactic, not going to lie, but still excited nonetheless. Ryan, my guy, how you doing tonight?
My brother, I'm good. I appreciate the flexibility and kindness as always. I thought I'd give myself plenty of time to get my folks to the airport and get back in time, and clearly did not. So thanks to you. Thanks to all your viewers. It looks like they've been hanging out in the chat for 30 minutes or so. So thanks for waiting on me. I think we'll have a fun conversation. It's always a blast and good to see you. And I got to say, Jesse, New Year's Day, I live in Pasadena, California. I don't know how many people watch the Rose Parade. The Rose Bowl obviously is great, but the Rose Parade, ESPN had a float in the Rose Parade. I was out on Colorado Boulevard and I'm like, is Jesse here in Pasadena? And no, it was just Tim Tebow up on their float. So I thought you flew all the way out to do this show in person with me, but oh well.
Oh man, this guy 2 years ago essentially started this whole thing that I look like Tim Tebow, and every once in a while I'll get a picture posted on my Twitter timeline, and you can thank this guy for starting it. It's pretty funny. In fact, even in DMs yesterday, he just sent me a random Tim Tebow gift. Like, here you go, man. Enjoy. So appreciate you for that. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Now, I do want to say there was a super chat. I don't even remember who asked it, and I apologize. It was set up for when we were going to start at 10, but I do remember the question. The question was, what if Sam Darnold balls out this week, and what does it mean? It means that Sam Darnold might get paid somewhere else to be a backup for them. That's what it means. He's not ever going to play over Purdy unless Purdy is injured. And maybe it could give you a little bit more confidence if Sam Darnold had to play for any reason in the playoffs, but that's about it. It would mean absolutely nothing. That's it. That's what it would mean. So there you go. All right, brother. Listen, I have some questions for you around the Rams that don't have anything to do with this game. We will talk a little bit about this game because there are some things that can come out of it, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. But there is this question that keeps being brought up around four key members of the Rams, and it talks about, retirement or a hiatus. Now, one thing we have heard is that McVay is not walking away. He will be back next year. He was asked that pretty directly and gave a pretty direct answer. So good for the Rams. McVay will be back. I would assume that Aaron Donald is not going to walk away. He's got a lot of money sitting there, so I doubt he goes. But there are two players that I keep hearing about. One of them is Matthew Stafford. The other one is Cooper Kupp, believe it or not. And so we'll start with Stafford. Do you see a scenario where Matthew Stafford walks away after this season, Ryan?
I think the only scenario, because he's come out during the season, says he wants to play a few more years. He's still passionate about it. He's playing at an elite level, kind of a down game last week against the Giants, but overall playing very, very well this season. And in my opinion, not trying to be biased, but I feel like he should be he's not the MVP, but he should be at least in the conversation based on what the expectation was for this Rams team going into the year. That being said, if the Rams shock the world and go and win the Super Bowl, then I think he would maybe really consider. I still don't think he necessarily will, but that would be the only scenario where he would consider. retiring, because I think the passion's still there. What they've built this season, the chemistry, the fun that they're having as a team, the cohesiveness as a team. I mean, this is the most fun I've ever seen this Rams team probably since McVay's been here. It's just a cohesive group that they've kind of had this mentality that they weren't thought to do anything, no expectations compared to last year after being the Super Bowl chance. And so this year it's just been kind of a, balls to the wall, just, have some fun and see what happens. So yeah, to answer your question long-windedly as usual, I don't see him retiring. If they were to somehow win the Super Bowl, it would be much more of a thought. I still don't necessarily see it happening, but that would have to happen for it to even be a conversation, I think.
What about Cooper Kupp? This is one that caught me off guard, and I should have asked you weeks ago, and I've just kind of saved this one. I heard it about like 8 weeks ago. Somebody who's supposedly plugged in with the Rams came out with the rumor, and then some people refuted it and said no. But he has had some injuries the last couple years. It's not like he's not old, but he's also at an age where if he walked away, he'd be like, okay, I get it. Is there any chance that he retires after this year?
I still don't think so, but he is much more likely because of what you just said. There's some injury there. He's a guy that is going to be a coach immediately. I know,
Mm,
you guys have Wes Welker there, and whatnot, and his great NFL career now coaching receivers. Cooper Kupp, I think, especially if the Rams want him, would be on the staff next year if he did retire. So there's a career path there in coaching. And then the injuries, like you said, he's on the other side of 30, just there. But I think it's because of, like I said, I don't want to repeat it, but how this season's gone, but because it's building up to one more kind of all-in run in 24, 25, and 26, I think, and I know we'll get to probably Donaldson in a second, but I think the whole band will be back for at least 24 and maybe even 25, because now this is the first offseason in recent memory where they're going to go in with 80 plus million in cap. They have all their draft picks, including a first round
yeah.
pick for the first time since 2016. So it's like they over exceeded expectations this year, and now they can go in the next year with the band back together, all this cap space to rebuild, to not even rebuild, but just to retool on what they already did, plus all their draft picks. So I would be shocked if any of these big names did retire this offseason. Of any of them, though, the one that makes the most sense would be Cooper Kupp, just because of the injuries and because of his path to coaching basically immediately.
Yeah, and I actually I don't think that there's anything to the Aaron Donald retiring, not after that payday he got, which really I don't think kicked in until this year, and it probably even goes up next year. So I don't see him walking away. But when you look at the Rams, and it's interesting because they kind of did a Seattle Seahawks from last year, where everybody thought, 3, 4, 5 win team.
Yeah.
And then here they are. They've snuck into the playoffs, and so much so that they didn't even need the Week 18 game, which is kind of crazy to really think about it, especially the way the season started and Cooper Kupp being injured. All the when they when they got rid of Ramsey, it was like, oh, here they go. They're going to tank, and none of that has happened. It's been the exact opposite of tanking. They've done a fantastic job. And I guess the questions are being asked because I'm looking at it saying, man, if they don't have to replace any of those guys immediately next year, they do get all their draft picks and they have about 40 million to spend. Ooh, they could be very competitive next year. Very, very competitive. Even more so than they are this year. They're competitive now. They're scary out, but next year they could really make some noise. And they've become an interesting team almost overnight, which is crazy to say for a team that won a Super Bowl just 2 short years ago.
Yeah, it's impressive. I think when you look at what Les Snead and McVay has obviously handed it, once he decided at the end of last season that he was all in, he's back. The brass got together and kind of formulated a plan of what the future looked like, and not just for 23, but 24, 25 and beyond. And, there's always the talk about, this team went all in and they're setting themselves up for failure. And eventually, the checks are going to have to get cashed at one point, and which we saw this offseason. That was kind of, they got rid of everyone. Bobby Wagner, they had a 5-year deal after one season. They cut bait with him. They trade Jalen Ramsey. They released Leonard Floyd. All these big name guys, they get rid of Allen Robinson, they dump. And so it looked really bad. And we talked a lot on our show. And I think because we played week 2. So me and you did this
Mhm.
show way back in week 2. And I thought this team was at least going to be competitive just because I think Sean McVay is that good of a coach. But in order for them to be where they are now, they had to absolutely nail their draft class. And Les Snead, I think, their GM has done a really good job drafting the later rounds. Obviously, they never have first round picks, so he's always drafting the later rounds. So he's hit some really good ones, but this year, which I'm sure we'll talk about, here soon, just absolutely nailed. I mean, Steve Avila, no one's talking about. He was their first pick, and he's one of the bright young guards in the NFL. I mean, he reminds me of a Quentin Nelson over in Indianapolis, just a mauler up there, finally getting the size. And we can go down the list of Kobie Turner, Puka Nacua, all these guys. Kyren Williams drafted last year. But the other thing, and I know I'm getting long-winded, but the other thing, Jesse, is
No, go ahead.
I think what the Niners have done so well during this Shanahan tenure and John Lynch tenure is, and you could maybe disagree, a lot more than I do, but at least what I've seen is they've done a really good job overall in the trenches. Obviously, they had those back-to-back years of taking, a defensive lineman in the top 5. So they've done really well in the D line and in the offensive line. Even when they've lost guys, lost McGlinchey last year, like the offensive line has always been a point of strength. Maybe not the best in the NFL, but certainly not a bottom half. So the trenches have always been good. And the Rams, even in their Super Bowl year, have kind of gotten by with patchwork trenches. Now, when you have Aaron Donald, you're afforded to do that. That certainly helps. And Andrew Whitworth in the Super Bowl year certainly made up for it on the left tackle. But this offseason, they really, and not necessarily in free agency, but in the draft, they really dedicated themselves to becoming a more, not just good in the trenches, but less, we always say on our show, less glitz and glammy like Hollywood and more grit and grimy like sometimes it takes to win in the NFL in the trenches. And you see with Steve Avila, they added Kevin Dotson right before training camp, free agent out of Pittsburgh. And their offensive line is playing a lot better than people anticipated. And obviously the D line with Donald and Kobie Turner, the rookies, playing well as well. So the fact that they committed to the trenches is, I don't want to say they copied the Niners, but I think they saw that they had to do that if they wanted to have any success this year.
Turner's having a fantastic year, by the way. Very, very good year. Solid year. Yeah, I mean, I think that they have done a great job drafting. I mean, you really look at it, Puka Nacua. If you paid attention to the draft coming in, a lot of people like Puka Nacua. A lot of the people that spend a lot of time around the draft, Brett Coleman talked a lot about him. He compared him. He said him and JSN are very, very similar, except for one you can get a hell of a lot later. And he was absolutely right about that. Puka Nacua has been fantastic. And Williams, second leading rusher in the NFL behind Christian McCaffrey. And he missed 3 or 4 games. He's been fantastic. This is the most balanced Rams team out of all of them, in my opinion, with Sean McVay. I know that they had a very good running game and when Goff was there and Goff was putting up some good numbers as well, but Goff is not Stafford. And I think that Williams has done a fantastic job. This is the most balanced offense that I've seen from the Rams. And that when you start to add some more talent through the draft and free agency next year, things can get interesting. They could be an interesting team.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they can do a good draft this year, like you said, and really just build upon it with now some cap, with some continuity, like every year, they're probably going to lose another coordinator. I'm sure Raheem Morris is going to get hired away, most likely their DC.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But man, I mean, kind of getting back, and obviously it's your show, lead the show, but kind of getting back to the game, like 2 weeks ago, Jesse, I was like, man, this game's going to be great. Niners are probably battling for the number 1 seed. Rams are going to be battling just to make the playoffs. It's going to be like, the already teams hate each other. And then it's like one team could either play spoiler and kick a team out of the playoffs, or the other team wins and knocks them out of the number 1 seed. And now we're getting the Wentz Darnold, the former. Do you think, has there ever been a former number 3 overall pick versus number 2 overall pick, and yet both of them are backups?
Man, that is crazy to think about. It really, what's funny about this whole thing too is last year I had predicted that Carson Wentz would be the backup quarterback in San Francisco, and obviously that didn't come to fruition. Similar, right? Sam Darnold's pretty similar, but this is 2 guys trying to find any way to save their career. They'll probably never be starters again, at least not long term, maybe spot starters, what have you. But this is an interesting matchup. It's funny because it certainly doesn't have the intrigue that we thought it was going to. And as a content creator, I got to say, this is the first time that I've ran into this where in the season, I've essentially got 3 weeks where I have nothing to talk about as far as the games go, because Washington was like the placeholder game. It's like, okay, it's Washington, whatever. They're going to win. The Rams will beat the Giants, which that one got a little squirrely. The Rams will beat the Giants. And then, but week 18, we'll have something good to talk about here. And then that got taken away. Then the 49ers are going to get the bye. And then finally they'll get into the playoffs. This is the first time that I've had this happen. Obviously, the offseason, you're always, you're constantly trying to find topics, and that can be tough. But mid-season, I've never ran into this for this big of a stretch. So, but as a fan, not the content side of things, I love it, because now the Niners are in a good spot, and everybody's got to go through them. It's no stress. Exactly. So I love it.
Yeah. I mean,
Dave says, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying you guys are damn good. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about some of these matchups, but Dave says one more reason to not like the Rams. 30 minutes late, huh?
Dave, I'm on LA time. LA time, everyone's late. Come on. It's LA time.
Yeah, I was early for LA time. Ricky Williams says Sam's stat prediction. Oh man. I'll go.
What's insane to me while you're thinking, it's insane that Sam Darnold's still only 26 years old.
Right? Well, dude, we've got quarterbacks coming out that are 24 in their rookie season next year, and Nix and Penix. They're going to be 24 years old when they take their first snap in the NFL next year. That's crazy.
The Rams drafted Stetson Bennett last year in the 4th round. He was 25 when they drafted him.
Yeah.
Same age as Darnold at the time. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is actually pretty crazy. I will go 20 of 28, 253, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. 20 of 28, 253, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. That's the prediction. And the Niners will lose because Carson Wentz always beats them in some weird way. He went basically on a world tour to different teams and kept beating the 49ers. So I don't know. It's the strangest thing ever. Although they did finally get their revenge last week. So maybe I'm going to ride with Sam Darnold. We'll see. But all right, let's talk about your preference in this whole thing. The way that I see it is, obviously the 49ers really have nothing to play for. The Rams technically don't have a lot to play for, but they kind of do. They get to pick their opponent essentially based on how this game goes. If they win it and they put in effort to do so, they face the Lions. If they lose it, then they face the Cowboys or Eagles, most likely the Cowboys. So what is your preference? What do you want to see round one? If Ryan gets to choose who they play, is it Detroit or is it Dallas, and why?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first, just purely as a fan of football, not even if I'm saying Rams or whatever, but as a fan of football, it's got to be Rams Lions. Stafford's return to Detroit, Jared Goff against the Rams and McVay. There's not bad blood, which is cool. Like, it's very amicable between all those guys. I know at the very beginning of the trade, there was some weird stuff between McVay and Goff coming out, but they've since, everything's all good there. Obviously, the city of Detroit still loves Stafford. So, there would be nothing cooler than seeing Stafford back at Ford Field playing against the Lions. And so just as a fan of football, that would be a blast. As an opponent of who I think the Rams match up better against, again, I think it's the Lions. Now, hear me out here. I think the Lions are overall a better team than the Cowboys overall, but at home, those Cowboys are damn good, man. They can't win and do a lot on the road, but at home, they are dominant. The Rams' one blowout loss this season was to those same Cowboys. Now, Kyren Williams didn't play that game, and I think Cooper Kupp was out that game as well, but still, they got absolutely their doors blown off in that one. So I would much rather the Rams win this game and play Detroit. The storylines are better, and I think they match up better against Detroit. Even though they're overall a better team, I think they have a better shot than facing Dallas in the Big D.
Oh my gosh, how sad would it be to be a Detroit Lions fan and have to deal with that? That is so... I can't even imagine what that would feel like if Stafford comes back and knocks them out of the playoffs after all of this elation and effort they've put in this season. to lose to it's the worst dagger to the heart of that poor fan base. They deserve something, but I agree with you. The NFL, if it is scripted, definitely needs to make Rams versus Lions, and we need to see Flacco return to play the Ravens. Those things have to happen. I need it in my veins. Inject it, please, because I, as a football fan, it is must-watch TV. Absolutely would love to see it. Love to see it.
Oh yeah. Or what if we get a Buccaneers Browns Super Bowl, Baker against the Browns? How fun would that be too?
Gross.
Your
so
hometown, baby.
It's so gross. It's so gross. I don't. You know what? I might kick you out of here for that one. Oh God, that'd be terrible. That'd be terrible. Somebody says, Red Eye, the Ravens are in the same situation as the 49ers where they have nothing to play for. So they've got the bye. They've got the number 1 seed. Lamar's not playing, most likely. So they might lose to the Steelers. I would agree there. Dave says, how about my Oregon Ducks and Knicks? Whew. Jesse, aren't you a Ducks fan? I am a Ducks fan. Let's take bets right now. Where does Knicks go? And yes, Lions Rams is the game that I want to see out of all of them. Let's go Goff. I don't think Lions fans want to see it. I think they're probably the only ones in the world that don't want to see it. I think Rams fans want to see it. I think everybody that doesn't care wants to see it. I don't think Lions fans want any part of that at all. So
they know how good Stafford is.
No. And where does Knicks go? Gosh, man, that's
a great question.
I don't think Knicks is a first-round quarterback. That's me personally. I think he's more of a second-round guy who takes him. I mean, you get into the second round, and a lot of teams could be interested. You could see a team like Miami even taking a flyer on him, where it's like, hey, we have Tua, we kind of believe in him, but not really. So I could see something like that going on, where I feel like he could operate that offense at a pretty high level. I don't know, man. I'll say I'll say the Vikings. Vikings. He'll be a Viking.
That.
There we go.
I like that. And I think that's better for him if he can go somewhere and sit a year or two.
Yeah, I think so.
He'll be 30 by the time he plays, but
for sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, that Chris Winkie.
Yeah.
Dave Barclay says, "Oh, nice, Jess. I didn't think Flacco versus the Ravens. Nice. Yeah, Flacco versus the Ravens that'd be great." Gammon says, "Jesse, you have taken some shots recently on Twitter for your Purdy backhanded compliments. As a staunch supporter of yours, who has seen you adamant before the NFL draft for Brock? What say you?" As a staunch supporter of yours, who has seen you adamant?
Were you pro Brock before the draft?
Yeah, I started talking about him in 2020.
Nice. Okay, take your lap.
Yeah, I don't really care. If you want to go search my Twitter, you'll see it all over there. If you want to go search my reaction to the draft on this channel, you'll see me celebrating. If you want to search the mock drafts before, you'll see that I mocked them to the 49ers. But if you aren't all in on everything that the 49ers do, you're talking to a fan base. I would expect that you're going to get some pushback, and that includes with Brock Purdy. And yes, I have said my opinion on Brock, and I will continue to do so. And if people take exception with that, by all means, take exception with that. But don't conflate liking somebody for not necessarily buying into everything that they are putting out. You can like somebody and not believe that they're the best quarterback in the world. Those two things can both exist. So that's all. Dave says, if someone takes Darnold, maybe we could get him. If someone takes Darnold, maybe we could get him.
Bo Nix, I think he's talking about.
Oh, Bo Nix. Okay. Yeah. Keep up, Jesse. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's just, I wouldn't mind having Bo.
Taking Moody in the third round and then going Bo in the second.
That's the problem. I'm not taking him in the second round pick. It's like if he fell to the third and it was great value and you could get him with a compensatory pick, sure, I would be all for that. But I don't know. I wouldn't take him with a second round pick. There's just absolutely no way. All right, Ryan. The Rams have really picked up a lot of steam when it comes to being the tough out of the NFC. And I could really see why Matthew Stafford is arguably the best quarterback in the NFC. The AFC is stacked with elite quarterbacks. I think when I look at it, there's usually around 7 quarterbacks consistently throughout the years that are your mainstay quarterbacks. And Stafford is one of those guys. I put him in that tier where he's one of the more elite quarterbacks in the league. And when you have to play elite quarterbacks, anything can happen any given Sunday. They've really picked up steam. So let's remove the 49ers, because obviously it's easy to say the 49ers, home field advantage, number 1 seed, steamrolling everybody. They're the scariest team. But if we remove the 49ers, can you make a case that the Rams are the toughest out in the NFC if the 49ers don't exist? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I really think you can. And you look at their body of work, you look at their schedule. Like I mentioned, that Cowboys game was their one blowout loss. Other than that, they lost 20-3 to the Packers at Lambeau with Brett Rippon as their quarterback, because Stafford was out that week and Kyren Williams was out that week. They were missing Cooper Kupp for 4 weeks. They've had other injuries, and they took the Eagles to the brink. They took the Baltimore Ravens to overtime. They probably should have won that game and gave up a punt return in overtime to lose. So they're a obviously well-coached team. What Raheem Morris has done on the defensive side of the ball is, in my opinion, like the most impressive coaching job I've seen in quite some time, based on the talent they have there outside of Aaron Donald. And just the fact they play good defense. They're not an elite defense, but they play good defense and competitive and keep you in games. And then I'll end with saying what you just said. I mean, Matthew Stafford is still at 35 years old and coming off a neck injury, still one of, I think, the elite quarterbacks in the game today, and certainly one of the top ones in the NFC. I mean, you look at, and we don't have to go over his whole body of work, but when you look at elite receiver play and you look at Calvin Johnson, who set the record when he was playing, his quarterback was Matthew Stafford. You look at Cooper Kupp, who won the triple crown. His quarterback was Matthew Stafford. And now you look at Puka Nacua, who's about to break the rookie record that's been over 60 years for most receiving yards by a rookie, and his quarterback is Matthew Stafford. So there's something to be said about how good he is, how good of a leader he is. Still, I think, has some of the best arm talent in the game today. His biggest problem, which as Niner fans know and probably love, is he can get a little trigger happy and he is a gunslinger and can make some of those mistakes. He can, but just at the same time, he can make those throws that just make you go, wow. So, yeah, long-winded answer. I think just because of the core that they have with Kupp, Stafford, and Donald, the role players that have become really good this year in Puka Nacua, in Ernest Jones, in Jordan Fuller, and some other guys, in Kyren Williams, and because of who their coach is, like, yeah. And the last point I'll say, I know I always get long-winded whenever you ask me.
No, do it.
I want to hear
Yeah,
more from
listen,
you.
I want to. Yeah, you're good.
Last point I'll say, and this is going to sound like, for those of you that were saying, Jesse saying backhanded compliments, this will sound like a backhanded compliments against the team I cover, but because they don't really have a true home field advantage here in LA, it makes them that more dangerous, because in football, especially in the playoffs, right, home field is everything. I mean, it means so much. And the Rams they never really have that home field. So they're used to playing kind of an away situation 18, 17 games a year almost. And so they can go into these games being a 6 or 7 seed on the road. And it's not as daunting as it would be for a Dallas Cowboys team that is so dominant at home, but very lackluster on the road. The Rams, I think, can play anywhere. Now, weather can obviously be a factor, but looking at the NFC schedule, I think they'll be okay based on the teams that are in it. So, yeah, I think they could definitely be a tough out.
Yeah, I think so, man. I think the Rams are like the one team. I'm not like scared of any team. I definitely think the 49ers are the clear-cut favorite. In fact, one of the questions that I've talked about this week was, because the Ravens beat the 49ers, but the 49ers were still Super Bowl favorites. It's like, well, how can that be? And the only logical thing that I can come up with is, if you ask me to bet and you say, all right, you can have the Ravens or you can have the field in the AFC, I would take the field. Now, the Ravens are the best team, but I could see scenarios where maybe the Browns, that's a division game for them, they could upset them. Maybe Mahomes gets hot or Josh Allen gets hot and they could upset them. Like, I could see those scenarios playing out. When I look at San Francisco and the path to the Super Bowl, I don't really see a lot of issues for the 49ers. That being said, the Rams are just the one team. If I could avoid, or the 49ers could avoid, I would feel much better about that. That being said, if they play, I have the utmost confidence. The 49ers are clearly the better team top to bottom,
Yeah.
but Matthew Stafford can just get hot, man, and he is a good quarterback. Do you think Matthew Stafford is a for sure Hall of Famer? If he retires this year, after this year, is he a lock in your opinion? Because I go back and forth on this. I'm also a very tough critic, by the way. What I look at as the Hall of Fame versus what the Hall of Fame actually is, I wouldn't put Eli Manning in the Hall of Fame. And I know that he beat Tom Brady twice, but that's just me personally. I also, 49er fans are going to hate this, and I don't know why I'm even throwing myself under the bus for this one, because I did it a year and a half ago, and they hated it then, and they're going to hate it now. I wouldn't put Frank Gore in the Hall of Fame. So I personally would say no on Stafford. I would say no on guys like Rivers. But what do you think? Do you think that he should be a Hall of Famer if he retires after this year?
Yeah, it's a fun conversation, and it's like I agree with you. Like I wouldn't put Rivers in. We cover the Chargers here as well, and he's a guy that I think I keep out just because when you look at especially quarterback play, to me, and I know winning Super Bowls kind of gets overblown, but I think you got to have those big wins, and Super Bowl sometimes is obviously one of them. You've got to, if you don't have those Super Bowl wins, you had to have at least a year or two where you were clearly the best quarterback in the entire league. And so if you get both of those, then I think you become maybe not a lock, but a for sure at some point nominee to get in. I think Stafford does check those boxes. He got a Super Bowl last year, and he's had a few years where he statistically was the best quarterback in the league. Now, obviously, he's the number one overall pick, but he had those years. Whereas a guy like Phillip Rivers never led the league in passing yards, never led the league in touchdowns, and never won a Super Bowl. So he was really, really good, but he was never great. Whereas Stafford, you can look at a year or two where he was great, plus he got the Super Bowl. So it's close. I don't think he's a surefire. But especially if he plays another couple years, I think it's pretty likely he could send, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he likely does get in. I don't know. Like I said, I'm a tough critic. Now, I mean, he kind of is Phillip Rivers with a ring, really. It is the way that you can look at it. So maybe you don't put Phillip in, but you put Stafford in. Because he's accumulated the numbers, to your point, he's also has led the league a little bit. So that's,
I also and this, I don't know if Hall of Fame voters do this, but like if you just watch, like everyone talks about the eye test, right? Like if you watch Stafford and Rivers, it's like, come on, like let's be honest here. Like who was the better QB when you look at the ball pop off their arm and the throws they make? And I love Phillip Rivers, but let me ask you this real quick. This is not on that topic, but since you brought up the Ravens, I think I agree with you. I think the Niners are the best team in football, and that roster is so good and obviously well coached and whatnot. And every really good team, this is what makes the NFL so great, is you're allowed to have, I mean, maybe not allowed, but you're going to have a bad week. And I think that was just
for sure
a bad week against the Ravens. I don't think that showed the Ravens were that much better. It was just an off game for the Niners. That being said, though, does it concern you at all that because this NFL is a copycat league and the Ravens and McDonald, their defensive coordinator, maybe put a blueprint out there of the best way to stifle the Niners? And, obviously pressure gets to any quarterback, it's going to make it worse. But when you look at it, and a lot better than me, and your listeners know a lot better than me, because I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched hours of tape of the Niners, but, overall, Brock Purdy, as good as he is, and I think he is actually a really good quarterback, but there's a lot of times when he has a lot of time and gets good pocket presence and is able to make those reads and make those throws and has receivers that schematically get open well, and the Ravens were able to just dial up that pressure. So is it concerning you all that maybe they gave the blueprint to the NFL, or is it more of it was just an off week and forget about it, move on?
I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that there's definitely a blueprint, but the blueprint is not something that everybody can execute. And I said this after the Cleveland game, which really, there's two games that have been outliers for this offense and for Brock Purdy in particular. One of them was Cleveland. I know they had the 3-game losing streak, but Brock really did play well until he didn't. Right? I mean, you can say that, and he threw the picks and whatever, but he looked like Brock Purdy for big chunks of the games against the Vikings and the Bengals. Cleveland, he looked nothing like himself. in Baltimore, he looked nothing like himself. So, yes, there's a blueprint of sorts, but I think it's less schematically and more just how talented those defenses are. I mean, you look at Cleveland, they have 3 very high level corners, and they can get pressure with their front four without sending more people at you. And then you look at Baltimore, same thing. They have high level secondary, very good linebackers also to go on top of it, 2 Pro Bowl linebackers actually, and a front four that can get home without sending extra bodies. So I think just the blueprint is you're an elite defense with elite players. You can win some games and you can make some things tough on a quarterback who is only a year and a half into his career and hasn't seen everything yet. As good as he's been, he hasn't seen everything yet. And that will come with time. Now, what kind of makes me feel a little bit better about that game is not that, okay, he threw 5 picks or they threw 5 picks. They're not going to do that again. I do think the Ravens can force turnovers on the 49ers if they meet again. But really, the shock factor of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is now 20-1 versus the NFC. That is not a fluke. That is a real thing. And if you face Lamar Jackson once every 3-4 years, he really can wreck a game plan. He's so unique. There's nobody like him. And as he's played, he's gotten better and better passing from the pocket. So he is just a unique player that you cannot prepare for. However, the 49ers have now played him. So the shock and awe of Lamar Jackson wears off when you get to game plan for him a second time and you get 2 weeks to prepare for him. So if that matchup were to occur again, I don't think it would be smooth sailing necessarily for Purdy. I don't think he'd go for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. I think there'd be some tough moments, but I think that they've proven they can keep up with Baltimore, and I think Purdy would play much better, and the defense playing Lamar Jackson would not have that shock value, and I think that it is a very winnable game the next time that they would play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because it goes both ways, right? Like maybe Baltimore gave a little blueprint, but also now the Niners are able to see kind of what their weaknesses are and able to pivot that. And that's up to Kyle Shanahan, obviously schematically to go against that. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm sure I pissed off some people with that Frank Gore take, so let's see where this goes. Dave says, Jesse talked about Purdy before he was on the team. I did, but if you don't bend the knee and say he's absolutely elite, then nobody cares. Dave says, gave Justice flowers and he skipped my 199. No, I just didn't get to it yet. Keith says, McVay has done a hell of a job. I'd rather play Dallas than the Rams. My hot take a couple weeks ago, and it's likely not going to happen now, Ryan, was if the Rams match up against the Eagles, at that time the Eagles were looking to likely have the number 2 seed, that the Rams would beat the Eagles. Now, that's not going to happen. Not so much of a hot take now. I think everybody would probably pick it, but overall, yeah, I think the Rams are a team that I would much rather play Dallas. Much rather play Dallas.
Oh, at home, absolutely.
Yeah,
and you guys always beat Dallas. So
yeah, it's much easier.
You always beat the Rams too, though. Let's be honest, at least in the regular season.
Gammon says, Jesse, I spoke with some content creators and was surprised at how little credit you received for being first Niner on the Purdy bandwagon. Receipts get pulled except for the ones for you being first. Like I said, Gammon, it's based on your opinions now. And, because I don't believe that Purdy is a franchise quarterback. You're not going to get credit for it. You know what I mean? And so I think that it's based off of what the fans tell you. And if the fans want to hear certain things and you don't give it to them, then it's automatically hate. So I appreciate you for standing up for me, I guess is what you're doing, but there's no need. Everything's out there. If people really want to do digging, they would see it, but I don't really need approval from anybody else. I don't care.
Oh, people love digging. Don't
no, they love to dig. They love to dig. Yeah. So, Brother Bob says, Ryan, you don't want the smoke from the Lions. I think Ryan wants all the smoke from the Lions, actually, is what he basically just said.
Let's do it.
Yeah, do we all want to see it?
In. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see Taylor Decker check in with the ref. Let's bring it.
Oh, man, that was awful. Dave says Stafford should be known for losing because of an interception. Yeah, he'll throw it up, man. He's got a little bit of Brett Favre to his game, a little bit of gunslinger for sure, and he's got that arm. The no look passes, it was him first, not Mahomes, but those things can get you into trouble. They can. Brother Bob says trying really hard to get on the PP list. Gore equals Hall of Fame. Let me make a quick case. Everything Ryan said about Phillip Rivers, ditto for Frank Gore. Is that fair? He's got all of the accumulative numbers, but he was never the guy. He was you never looked up and said Frank Gore is the best running back in the league. You probably never thought he was even top 2. I think he had a year where you could say he was probably top 3. But when you aren't the best player at any point in your career against your peers,
because here's a perfect example. Not to cut you off, but on your point, Terrell Davis, dude played 7 years, played 4 good years.
Yeah,
he's in the Hall of Fame because for 3 of those 4 years, he was far and away the best running back in football.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what it comes down to. So, I mean, that's just me. It's not the Hall of Very Good. Frank Gore is very, very good, but I do think Frank Gore probably does eventually get in. I'm just saying if I am running the Hall of Fame, there are a lot of really good players that we all thought were very good when they played that wouldn't get in. And for me, Phillip Rivers would be one. Stafford's borderline. Matt Ryan wouldn't get in. Eli Manning wouldn't get in. Frank Gore wouldn't get in. There's just some players there that were very, very good, but they're a notch below. Brother Bob says first the Bengals and now the Hall of Fame for Gore. This guy, Brother Bob is taking exception with the Frank Gore. I knew there'd be somebody. Gammon says for the algorithm. Oh, this is good. This is good. This is good. He says, for the algorithm, how tall are you? For the love of Jesus, don't say 6'2". Everyone is 6'2" with a beard that covers football. He's done this a few times this year. I'm 6'2". There are other content creators that he's asked. They've all been 6'2". How tall are you, Ryan?
Well, okay, I want you to guess. You've only seen me sitting down, so give it a guess.
I'm gonna guess that you are 5'11".
Okay, that's generous. So sadly, my dad, Gammon, is 6'4".
Okay.
But my mom is 5 foot. So I come in at a paltry 5'7" out here now.
5'7"? No way. I would have never guessed 5'7". That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
I played high school football, and whenever my dad would show up, my coaches would be like, Ryan, what the hell happened to you? Because in high school, I was even shorter. I was like 5'4". Here's my big 6'4", 225 dad. And like, what in the hell happened to you? I'm like, well, wait till you see my mom. Yeah. That's why it's good to sit down. No one can know that I'm like basically midget almost out here in LA.
I would have never guessed 5'7". There you go, Gammon. You finally win, man. You finally win. Brother Bob says, yeah, you did. Nails, check your Twitter. It's about Puka. Oh, I don't have time now. I will check it. I don't want to do it in the middle of the show, but I'm sure there's a lot of trash talk. Dave says, thanks, Jess. I appreciate you. Keith says, I agree on Gore and Eli. I would put Ben in even though he never made an All-Pro. By the way, another hot take since we're getting hot takes out. I'll take Ben Roethlisberger over Drew Brees. Give me Ben Roethlisberger over Drew Brees. Even though he never made an All-Pro, Eli was average, who had big-timer moments. Hall of Fame is only for the dominant. Yeah, I think Big Ben certainly gets in, and I would take him over Drew Brees. And the reason I say that is because I think Big Ben in a dome for his career would put up monstrous numbers. And if you put Drew Brees out in the elements of Pittsburgh, I don't know that he could go through some of those AFC teams, the Ravens, Steelers at home, the Browns they had to play once in a snow game, the Patriots, Denver, those cold weather games. I don't know if he would have done great in those elements, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, and there's obviously Brady proved this a little bit differently when he went to Tampa, but there's something to be said when you're a quarterback and you have the same offensive system your entire career. And obviously Brees started in San Diego at the time, Chargers.
Yeah.
But once he got to New Orleans, it was him and Sean Payton riding it out the whole way. So that makes it a lot different. Whereas Ben had multiple offensive coordinators, a lot of these other great quarterbacks have had multiple coordinators. And when you have the same system every year, like it's easy to, not easy, but it's easier to throw for 5,000 yards every year.
Brother Bob says, hell nails. Just come on, call the mofos out. Not going to do it. Keith says, Gore played while AP and LT were in the league. Yeah, not his fault, but those guys were but Curtis Martin's another one, right? Like between Curtis Martin and Gore, very similar. I would lean towards Curtis getting in, and I would probably slightly put him in. But him and Gore are similar, and if I have to choose between the two, I would take Curtis Martin. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. Not that you have to choose between the two, but that's kind of the way it works. All right. Let's see. Unknown. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, here we go. A player.
I love this layup, by the way. Well done.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was
season adjuststance. Well done.
Got to make it
week 18. You love it.
You got to level it up sometimes. You got to keep people guessing. Unknown. This is an unknown player. So normally what I would say is, hey, give me a player that most people don't know that is going to make a difference this weekend that we all need to hear about. But I'm going to take it a little bit different direction here. I want to know, because a lot of backups are going to play. Give me a player that you personally are excited to see play that maybe hasn't gotten a ton of run throughout the season. Who would you like to see play?
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear your answer. What's funny with this Rams team, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but it's really not. But because they're so young and have so much inexperience, that outside of their big core, which Sean McVay came out and said today that, Stafford's not playing, Kupp's not playing, Kyren Williams isn't playing, and Aaron Donald isn't playing. But outside of those, it's like they really can't bench anyone else, so they're fielding like a JV team. And so there's not going to be a ton of guys that haven't played this year is all I'm trying to say. Like there's going to be guys that maybe didn't play as much, playing a little bit more. But to answer your question, the one that I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver.
Yes.
I can't remember. I can't remember if I talked about him in week 2 with you, but going into the year on our show, it was like, okay, because this was before Puka Nacua was known to be great and whatever. It was like, okay, here's a guy that had, consistent success with the Chiefs, never dominant, but, averaged 400 to 500 yards every year. He's coming in now to this Rams system with Sean McVay. And after Cooper Kupp, like there was no true number 2 receiver. So I was like, Demarcus Robinson is a great opportunity to really be that guy based on his talent and skill level. And then Cooper Kupp gets injured and missed the first 4 weeks. Like, well, Demarcus Robinson's probably going to be wide receiver 1. Well, then Puka Nacua lights the world on fire and surprises everybody. Demarcus Robinson kind of gets forgotten about, not used very much. Tutu Atwell played really well early on. But these last, since the bye, Demarcus Robinson has, 4 touchdowns in 5 games, is really gotten good at, being that kind of go up and get a jump ball guy. So he's a guy that, going into this game, in this week specifically, I truly believe Puka Nacua will probably get his 2 catches for 35 yards in the first 2 drives, and they'll yank him out. So it's going to be kind of Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson, and Ben Skowronek kind of running the show with Carson Wentz throughout the game. So excited to see Demarcus Robinson continue to evolve in this offense, because I think he adds an element that isn't like the other receivers. If you look at Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, very similar in kind of skill set. They can both run out of the slot. They can do outside too, but they're better in the slot. Similar size. They're not elite speed, but they have speed, elusive speed that a lot of people don't know. Demarcus Robinson is a lot bigger, a little bit more athletic, and can do things differently. So a fun receiver that we'll see probably get more run, like you were asking, this week than he has, throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to choose from the 49ers side of things. I mean, they've got a couple young corners that I would love to see this weekend. Womack, Luter. You've got the linebackers, the rookie linebackers that I would love to see. But there are 2 players on offense that I want to see a lot of, and for different reasons. One of them is Jordan Mason.
Mm-hmm.
We've been kind of banging the drum as a fan base to get him carries all season long, and it just really hasn't happened for whatever reason. They just keep feeding CMC, which is great. CMC is fantastic, but we wanted a spell to be there. And then we also thought, okay, you know what? He's kind of earned passing Mitchell on the depth chart, and Mitchell's just kind of hung around and hung around and hung around. Now, finally, Mitchell, for the first time in nearly 2 years, looked his old explosive self this last week, which was awesome. But I still want to see Mason get 10 or so touches to make sure that we're not crazy, because a lot of us really see some good things from him. We see a little bit of Marshawn Lynch to his game. Where's number 24? He has the dreads. He's bigger, bow-legged. I mean, he has the Marshawn Lynch thing going. So we want to see that. And then another guy that I want to see, and we have seen some of him this year, and he's done well in the small stretches he's played, but that's Ronnie Bell. And the reason I want to see a lot of him this weekend is because Juwan Jennings is likely not going to be on this team next year. And he's been an integral part to this offense. He's the guy that on third downs, he's kind of that safety blanket. He's a very good blocker. And I want to know if they have the replacement on the roster. And I think Bell is that guy. But I would feel a lot better about it if Bell comes out and does some of the things that I think that he can do for a full game, and they can let Juwan Jennings walk at the end of the season and then plug Bell in. So for those reasons, I want to see these two guys depth pieces this year, but can make an impact next year. And I just got to see it play out. So there are a lot of young players on the defense I would love to see for sure, but I got to go with the offensive guys for those reasons.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of excitement there. I mean, I think some good picks, and see what they're able to bring to the table. So let me ask you this real quick before we move on to the prediction here. And this isn't a young guy, but what was your guys' reaction with adding Sebastian Joseph Day? I mean, obviously we've covered him here in LA. He was with the Rams, then he went to the Chargers, and I was like, man, obviously the Chargers released him so he could go to a contender. And the fact that Niners got him, I mean, he's just a solid, I mean, if he's a depth piece, I mean, that is a fantastic pickup by you guys. So what was your guys' kind of reaction when that happened?
Mixed bag, honestly. And I want to give a shout out to this one too, because I'm on board. Willis. I want to see Willis get some reps too. I'm right there with you. Right there with you. But mixed bag, because not because of him. Very excited about him, especially as a depth piece, hell of a player. And there were teams like Dallas that were looking to get him. I think Buffalo could have used him. So there are some teams that are playoff teams that really could have used him that didn't get him. So that's always exciting. But then there's the flip side of, why is he here? Because likely that means that Eric Armstead's injury is one that could keep him out through the playoffs. And that is a little bit worrisome, because Eric Armstead is such a big part of this team. And especially when it comes to run defense, which has been a little up and down this year, Eric Armstead is what really is the center of the run defense and plugs up everything that you can go his direction. So Eric Armstead has some plantar fasciitis. We pretty much knew at that point he wasn't going to play the rest of the regular season, and we'll see how the playoffs go. It's one of those things where he's got to deal with it. Pain management. It's not going to go away. So it's nice to have the depth if he can't go, but also kind of a bummer that, man, this thing is a little bit more serious than what we'd hoped. And he's a big part of this team. So a little bit of mixed thoughts around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly Eric Armstead is a more elite player. But I'll just say that you got a good one with SBJ, because he's or SB Day, because he's got a lot of good accolades to him, and is a fine ball player. So that was a great pickup in terms of depth.
Yeah, most certainly. Dave says, let's all do this. How tall are you? Well, I guess I'm 6'8". 6'8". Nice, Dave. Brother Bobs. He says, I'm creating a podcast to diss on nails. Steve Martin, but no Gore. What the living hell is wrong with you? Fall and bump your noggin. I'm going to meet Puka soon. F him though. Okay. Martin at least was an all-pro in his career. Pretty sure that he was an all-pro and was arguably the best running back in the league for a year. You can't say that about Gore. And they both had the cumulative numbers, but one guy for at least a year was the guy or the second best guy. You can't say that about Gore. So that's why, man, you got to be the best guy at least once in your career. You got to be a first-team all-pro. I love Gore, but man, I'm sorry,
dude, Martin.
I just don't see it.
Other than Martin's final season, every other season before rushed for over 1,000 yards.
What was his? Well, he was an all-pro, right? Make sure I'm not going crazy.
No, he was an all-pro and led the league with 1,600 yards. And his
There you go.
last season was the only season he didn't rush for 1,000. He still rushed for 800.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
So there you go. I mean, and Gore, listen, Gore
Gore
did
was
very
great.
well. He had a lot
Yeah.
of seasons over 1,000 as well. Nothing against Gore, but I think Curtis Martin was better. Dave says, please play Mason all game. See, we got to see it. Dave says, I agree with the chat. What's up with Danny Gray, man? I don't know that Danny Gray is going to be on this team past this year. We will see. I think that he snuck on this year, if I'm being honest with you, and his injuries have not helped things. So that's the way. It's the way it goes. It's the way that it goes. All right, let's give a prediction of a game that honestly doesn't hold a lot of weight, but it's still fun. And I'll go first on this one. Here's the deal. Carson Wentz against the 49ers always does pretty well, and they tend to win those games. That being said, for the first time in doing these behind enemy line shows, and I am very, Ryan, this started with you where I was pissing people off picking against the Niners when they would play the Rams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I picked against them both regular season games a couple years ago, and they won those games. And then finally in the NFC Championship, I picked them to beat the Rams, and the Rams won. So I was wrong every time through, right? That being said, this year, all season long, I did not pick against the 49ers. And I don't even think that that's a homer thing because the 49ers were that good this year. And so I'm not going to start now, not with the backups. I'm not going to come into the final week and go against the 49ers. I'm going to keep this thing going. I'm going to go 27-20. San Francisco 49er backups are just a little bit better than the Rams backups. And that's the way that I'm going to roll. What do you think? What's your prediction?
There we go. Love it. Love it. I say it all the time too, like not trying to be Homer. I'm going to pick the Rams only because I think they have more to play for. And it's not a lot more to play for, but I mean, the Niners literally have nothing to play for. The Rams have a date with Detroit or a date with Dallas basically to play for 6 or 7 seed, most likely. But a 6 or 7 seed. And you never know, that 6 seed could potentially, if things go their way in the playoffs, could get them a home game in the NFC Championship if things go crazy. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but 7 seed, they're guaranteed to play on the road no matter what. So I think they have a little bit more to play for. And then, like I said, outside of their core players that aren't playing, I mean, they don't really have a lot of backups that will be playing. It'll be guys just because they have to play them because that's the youth movement that they have this season. So I think it'll still be a fun game. I'm actually really looking forward to watch Wentz versus Donald. I think that's going to be a fun Wentz versus Darnold. Excuse me. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So I think it'll be close still. I will go. What was you were 27-20? Is that what you said?
27-20. Yep.
Okay, so I'll go 23-17. Rams backups win.
I like it. I like it. Cryptic says, what a story for these two teams. Basically, the 21st season, but 21 season, but in reverse. Yeah, kind of. The only difference is we really thought that the Rams were going to have to win to get in the playoffs. So, but there are a lot of similarities. Niners were coming in hot, and now the Rams with a young team, potential stars. You do not want to see the Rams in the early rounds. I agree. I don't think Dallas wants any part of them. I don't think Detroit wants any part of them. So I agree. I think the Rams are a live dog, and I think they will be underdogs in both those games, but at least betting wise. But I would pick the Rams. I really would. Dave says 31-17 Rams. You don't believe in our backups, Dave? Gosh, dude, what kind of fan are you, man?
Ooh,
I gotta question your fandom, really. No, I'm just joking. Hey, Ryan, thank you so much. Are you going to be at the Super Bowl stuff this year? I know that I'd hit you up about it, but are you going to actually go to Radio Row this year, or are you going to sit this one out?
Oh, that's the plan out in Vegas. So we've been lucky the last 3 years. We had LA, Phoenix, Vegas, all a stone's throw away from LA.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of them being in our city, so it makes it easy. But that's the plan, being down in Vegas on Radio Row. So hopefully, if the Niners are in it, hopefully you somehow meander your way out there. We'd love to link up.
You, if you get a chance to talk to McAfee, make sure those mics are on this time, man.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And did I tell you about Debo sitting at our table in LA? Did I tell you about that?
No, you didn't tell me that.
So, well, I'll be quick because I know we're getting to the end here. But when we were on Radio Row in LA, it was Rams Bengals, but all
Mhm.
the players come to Radio Row, and Debo Samuel came, and the table next to us, this lady that does a Niners podcast, like really wanted to interview Debo, but the table she was at, her other crew was already had an interview scheduled for that slot, and we were
Mhm.
like open at that time. So she's like, "Hey, do you mind if I interview Debo at your table?" And I was like, "No, that's fine, no big deal." But the beauty of it is our backdrop was all LA football. We had Rams helmets on the table. So I have photos
Nice.
of Debo getting interviewed, sitting with the Rams helmet, sitting with our LA football stuff. So,
Nice.
but yeah, it was kind of a cool moment.
Hey, that's good though. It gets your brand out there. Dave wants to clear things up. He says, "I question Darnold, not not the backups, but he does Darnold." All right, that's totally fair. We all question Darnold a little bit. We do. Well, Ryan, it's been awesome doing this again this year, 2 times. Maybe we can squeeze a third time out of this one. Wouldn't that be great? NFC Championship, if we can get it to happen. I don't think it's likely. I think we're going to see it maybe round 2. So either
Yeah.
way, we would get some sort of collaboration. But let's root for it. Let's root for Rams 49ers round 2 so you and I can do this one last time. And then hopefully I can be the one with bragging rights during this playoff run. I would love to get that get back because we kind of owe you one. We do.
Yeah. I mean, you deserve it. You deserve it in some regards. So, but no, hopefully, thanks again for the flexibility. Thanks everyone for hanging
Yes, of
out and
course.
waiting. And I see someone in there saying, I owe you 30 minutes. I believe I do. So, thanks for hanging out. But, no, always a pleasure, bro. And always so fun doing this. And I'm glad we've made this, not just a yearly tradition, but biannual or twice a yearly tradition. Hopefully we get
Yeah,
to 3, like you said. So always fun.
let's do it. All right, brother. Thank you so much. Everybody in the chat, appreciate you. I'll be back tomorrow. Peace.